Welcome back, Hedrix. So I will pass this on to you if you could do a quick little screen share, and we're
Oh,
going
yeah.
to recommence the presentation together.
Sure.
All right, you can start on over.
Okay, so let's start again. Hey, and welcome to my presentation, Eclipse Loves Java. I'm Hendrik Ebbers, I'm from Germany, and yeah, I do a lot of Java-related content, a lot of open source content in Java. And based on this work, I've become a Java champion, and since last year, I'm one of the board members of the Eclipse Foundation. And yeah, next to this, I have a company which is called Open Elements, where I do Java and open source related stuff, currently heavily investing in the Hedera public ledger, which is a big open source Java project. But what is more important for today is that I, from time to time, write code in IntelliJ, sometimes run applications by using Microsoft builds of the OpenJDK, and I create applications using Spring Boot. And maybe you know now, whoa, what? How can he talk about Eclipse if he's using IntelliJ, using Microsoft builds of the OpenJDK, and using Spring Boot? And this is exactly where I would like to talk about today, how all that is related to each other and is related to the Eclipse Foundation and the projects of the Eclipse Foundation. And while the Eclipse Foundation has really a lot of projects who use Java, I would like to concentrate today on the biggest projects in the Java ecosystem, which is the Eclipse platform and IDE, MicroProfile, JakartaEE, and Eclipse Adoptium. And we will have an overview about all those projects. And then, as I already mentioned, Java is used in a lot of projects and places within the foundation. We will have a general overview of the foundation. And I assume once we did it, you know how my Spring work in IntelliJ is related to Java and Eclipse. Okay, so let's start with the first topic, which is the Eclipse project. And if you never heard about the Eclipse project and you Google it, you find that. So what I found is like today the Eclipse project is a top level project that contains the Eclipse platform and the Eclipse JDT and many more. Well, so yeah, as said, if you have no idea what the Eclipse project is, this one definitely not helps, right? Maybe it just creates more question marks. So let's try to make that sentence way more understandable. And to do so, we will travel back in time to see where it's all started. But before doing that, from time to time, I will add some quotes from Mike Milinkovic to my slides, who's the executive director of the Eclipse Foundation. And regarding the Eclipse project and the Eclipse IDE, he said to me that Java has been at the core of the Eclipse Foundation project since its inception. And of course, the Eclipse Java IDE is used by millions of developers around the world. And especially the first sentence, which says that Java is at the core of Eclipse since its inception, is something we now want to have a look at by doing a time travel back to the year 1997. And in that year, IBM released the first commercial version of Visual H for Java, which is or was a Java IDE, a commercial IDE, and IBM released over 4 years 4 versions of that IDE. And to understand in what time we are, I found that one at Google about the last version of Visual H for Java, which cost $99 and came shipped with 3 CDs, which supported OS2 and Windows 32 as operation systems. So that is really outdated, right? But yeah, that was it, how it looked like in 2001. And one interesting thing is when hearing that and thinking about, well, an IDE in that time, like for OS2, how horrible must that have been? Actually, I Googled screenshot and it looked quite good. So those are screenshots of Visual H for Java. And if you ever used Eclipse, the IDE, you might already see some parallels, right? But you can see that there was even like a visual editor for UIs and things like that, part of the IDE. Okay, but why do we talk about those Visual H for Java IDE when this is about the Eclipse Foundation? Because that project has been open sourced in November 2001 by IBM under the name Eclipse. And that is the birthday of the Eclipse IDE as we know it today, because that is the successor of Visual H for Java, which was a commercial product by IBM and has been open sourced in November 2001. I just Googled like that version. Here you can see 2 of the screenshots from the IDE. And yeah, I mean, maybe some of you have even used that version. I assume I started a little bit later to use Eclipse, but when I've seen that it looks quite familiar to what I used at the beginning of my career. So when the project goes open source, what happened was that a board has been created to do the stewardship of the IDE. And at the beginning, in this board, there were 9 members, so 9 companies. And how you can see how successful this whole project, the IDE, was, is when you see that not even 2 years later, the number of the stewards of this board has increased to over 80 companies, right? And that is a really great number, especially in those times where like open source was not common. So having this open source project, the Eclipse IDE, was really a big, very big step forward in open source in general. And based on that and on that success, 1 year later, in January 2004, the Eclipse Foundation has been created. And when the foundation has been created, the goals of the foundation were written down, and they mention the independent non-for-profit corporation, which should the Eclipse Foundation be, should be the steward of the Eclipse community, right? In that case, the community of the Eclipse IDE was what was defined as the Eclipse community, and it should allow a vendor-neutral, open, and transparent community. And while that has been defined as the goals when the foundation has been created, from my point of view, the goals today are exactly the same. The only difference is that the foundation has not only the stewardship of the Eclipse IDE, but today of a lot of working groups, mission-critical projects, top-level projects, and so on, like things we will talk later about, like JakartaEE, Adoptium, but even projects in different areas, like in the automotive area and so on. But it's still independent, still not-for-profit, and the main goal is still to work together on vendor-neutral, open, and transparent projects. And yeah, from my point of view, that is really great. And coming back to the IDE, already in that days, the IDE was a modular framework, or was based on a modular framework. And that modular framework was named the Eclipse platform. And based on this platform, the IDE, so the program that we used to code Java, has been created. So it's not one big module or project of code, it's really modular, and it was already in those days modular, which was next to, it's an open source project, and there's an open source foundation, another really great part of that project, especially in those times. And when you think about it, it's really that you have this Eclipse platform that contains the modular framework, and then you have some other projects in the Eclipse project, top level project, which is, for example, Eclipse JDT, which are the Java development tools, and the Eclipse platform together with the Java JDT more or less defines what the Java IDE for Java is, right? So you need those two to create and work on Java projects within the within the Eclipse IDE. But there are many more projects within the top-level project, like, for example, the support for other programming languages like C and so on. And some people might say, yeah, Eclipse, the IDE, that was great several years ago, but today there is not that much progress in this project. And let me say you that with the new top-level project and the Eclipse IDE working group, there is a lot of things happening these days, especially since several big players like IBM, Bosch, SAP, or VMware come together to invest in the future of the Eclipse IDE. And even if some people moved away from the Eclipse IDE to other tools like Visual Studio Code or IntelliJ, it is still a very important tool and part of the Java ecosystem. I did this screenshot at EclipseCon last year. That was just based on the last release of the Eclipse IDE in that moment, and it was like, I don't know, like 3 months later after the release or so. And as you can see, at that day, the latest version has been nearly downloaded 4 million times. So it's used in so many places and so often, and wherever you go in our industry, you will find a lot of people working with the Eclipse IDE, and that is great. Because this really helps us to create diversity, not only have one IDE, have a totally independent, vendor-neutral IDE that is used within our industry. So, as said, I cannot go deep into each topic, so let's move on to the next project regarding Java in the Eclipse Foundation, which is MicroProfile. And again, to understand what MicroProfile is and where it's coming from, we need to travel to the past, exactly in the year 2016, so not that much in the past. And at that time, there was quite a problem, and it was a problem regarding Java in enterprise environments, because JakartaEE, which was the Java Enterprise Edition, was stuck. It didn't move forward anymore. It felt totally old based on the state of all the different specs that are part of the JakartaEE umbrella project, because all of them are not moved forward anymore. And when you have a look at the releases of JakartaEE, you can really see that between one and the next release, there are like 4 or 5 years. And in our world, right, where not even every year, every month, new technologies are growing and coming up, you cannot define a standard that should do everything in enterprise and provide a new release with new features every 4 years. That just don't work. especially when even with a new release of the umbrella framework, some of these specs have not changed and still needs, in worst case, like XML configuration and things like that. So based on that, an idea grown. And the idea was to, take some parts of JakartaEE, especially those parts that are interesting for creating microservices, service-based applications in general, and work and concentrate on those parts by providing a better integration between those parts and specs and a better interoperability in that case. So, and next to this, the problems that I mentioned should be solved, right? So with those smaller set of specifications and projects, all those should be moved forward way, way faster. And they should be real open source projects. Now you can say, hey, wait, what? Was JakartaEE not open source? Well, it depends. Because while the specifications, so the interfaces, the APIs like of JPA and so on, were open source and it was easy to find the sources, the test compatibility kits, for example, were not. So if you wanted to create something, not just an application by using JakartaEE, but maybe wanted to create a runtime and a container that was using JakartaEE, it was not that easy to test if everything is compatible with JakartaEE. Those parts were, for a lot of cases, closed source and owned by Oracle. And based on all that points, there was this first spark of an idea that started in 2016 in a Google group with a lot of discussions, right? So it started with, what's the name? Okay, yeah, we have a name. It's MicroProfile. Then, so what do we need for such a profile? What part of JakartaEE should be copied to MicroProfile? What new parts, like configuration APIs that was not part of JakartaEE, are needed? And where should all that be hosted? I just show here some screenshots of those old Google group discussions. They are still online, so I did this screenshot last year. This is where we discussed like what parts, what JSRs should be part of the MicroProfile spec and so on. And happily, this one is a great one, which came up by Kevin at the beginning of 2017, where he announced that MicroProfile will be part of the Eclipse Foundation, and all the projects will be under the Eclipse Foundation in GitHub, and the MicroProfile IO page will be hosted by Eclipse Foundation. And while we will have a look at what is in MicroProfile in a second, let's concentrate on that. So this new idea of moving JakartaEE way faster forward became, or got a nice home in the Eclipse Foundation and became a working group within the Eclipse Foundation with a lot of great companies like Microsoft, Red Hat, Tom Tribe, supporting it. Next to it, which is a great benefit of the Eclipse Foundation, some working groups like the IJAC, which is the German Java user group, or the Garden State Java user group, that were part of the working group, are able to work together with those big companies, are heard by those big companies, and allowed to give feedback like to each other. And within the Eclipse Foundation, the MicroProfile not only grows, but one thing, the idea of moving it faster or moving it forward way faster was really a success. So we've seen the releases of JakartaEE, right? So here we see the releases of MicroProfile. So especially at the beginning, where things needed to set it up, you see that MicroProfile did several releases each year. Now that it's more stable, it's like 1 or 2 releases each year, maybe one major release a year and then one minor release with bug fixes and so on each year. And that is way better than we've seen it from JakartaEE. And when looking at MicroProfile, that is how it is defined nowadays. So you do not see anything specific here like JaxRS, like JPA or something like that, because in the bottom left you see the JakartaEE 10 core profile. That is part of MicroProfile 6.1, so the latest version. So a part of Jakarta, and this part is now happily defined by Jakarta, and it's named the core profile, is part of MicroProfile. And next to that, several other services or specifications that you see here, like OpenAI, metrics, REST client config, and so on. And that is a really nice set to create small service-based applications or microservices within the Java ecosystem and that's the great difference against, for example, Spring or others, using standardized APIs that are standardized by a working group, by different vendors in a vendor-neutral way. And if you want to give it a try, you can do by checking out the MicroProfile starter today, which is great because that one easily creates you a Maven or Gradle-built Java project that contains everything that you need to do to create your own microservice based on the MicroProfile and just execute it and deploy it somewhere. That is really nice. So that's an overview of MicroProfile. Let's jump to the next one, which is JakartaEE, where we already heard several things about, right, when we talked about MicroProfile. And as mentioned earlier, we had a problem with JakartaEE in 2016. JakartaEE those days was not part of an open source foundation like Eclipse or something like that. It was defined by the JCP, which is the Java community process. And the idea of the JCP is that individuals and companies can work together on standardizations. The big problem with the JCP and the JakartaEE specs in particular was that you always have like a spec lead, and for JakartaEE in most cases Oracle was that spec lead, and a spec lead can be a blocker. So if a spec lead do not move things forward, a project can get stuck. And that happened with all the JakartaEE specs, because over the years, I would say Oracle just lost interest in those projects because they got stopped. And based on that, and that is really good news, in September 2017 at Java 1, Oracle announced that JakartaEE will be submitted to the Eclipse Foundation. And that is what we now know as JakartaEE. So what was JakartaEE in the past is now JakartaEE. And one thing about JakartaEE, what I really like, is that it already at the beginning showed how open the Eclipse Foundation is and how welcome it is for everyone to contribute to projects. Because something that a lot of you might not know is that the name JakartaEE, the renaming, was a must, because Java is trademarked by Oracle, and based on that, it was not possible to name it JakartaEE like it was, or reuse the logo of JakartaEE. So a new name and a new logo was needed. And what happened is that the community was involved in that from day one, and there was, for example, an open submission for the JakartaEE logo. And you can even today find those logos that I put on the bottom because all of them are official submissions for the JakartaEE logo, and you can still find them online. So there was really a voting and things like that to find what will be the JakartaEE logo. So it's not only about the software, it's really about everything within the project. And when coming from JavaEE, another big great thing is that now all the sources of JakartaEE are hosted at GitHub. And as I already mentioned, there was a problem with like the TCK that was not open sourced. The main goal, or one of the main goals of JakartaEE, is to have everything open source, including the documentation and the TCKs. And under the Eclipse Foundation, Jakarta 8, 9, and 10, so 3 major releases has been released so far, and Java 11 is nearby. So again, seeing like the releases from JavaEE next to releases from JakartaEE, you can see how much faster JakartaEE evolves. Actually, there was a big gap between the official JavaEE 8 release and then the JakartaEE 8 release, which in general is the same release because it contains the same code. But what happened in that time is all the legal work that needed to be done, the repositories needed to be set up, the builds needed to be automated, the working group needed to be set up, all the members of the working group needed to sign the paperwork, and so on, and so on, and so on. So that is why, especially for a big project like JakartaEE, which contains, I don't know how many sub-projects JakartaEE has. I assume I need to ask Tanya or Eva about that. But it will be a lot, right? With a lot of sub-projects, that just takes time to settle it in a good way so that everybody understands it, and so on and so on. And next to this, there was another problem, right? Which was the namespace problem. Because, as you might know, everything from JavaEE was under the JavaX namespace. So if you had an interface and an annotation or whatever from JavaEE, it was in a sub-package of the JavaX package. But the problem was that Oracle, as the trademarker of Java and looks like JavaX2, didn't allow the Eclipse Foundation to use JavaX. Well, that's not 100% correct. They said like, okay, you can release whatever you want. You can release what we have now under JavaX, but you are not allowed to change anything that is under JavaX. And since the idea of Jakarta was to move things forward, you want to change things, right? So one thing that needed to be done was renaming the package. So starting with JakartaEE 9, instead of having JavaX dot whatever, everything is now under the Jakarta main package. And that contained a lot of work, and not only in the Jakarta project, but in a lot of additional projects too, like projects like Wildfly or Tommy or other application servers, or, spoiler, even projects like Spring, because internally Spring uses a lot of JakartaEE specifications. So even Spring was or needed to change things based on this step. And when looking at the working group of JakartaEE, you can see a lot of companies that we already seen in the working group of MicroProfile, but here are even some additional ones, like, let me see who's here, who is not. I think Fujitsu is, for example, not part of MicroProfile. Oh, in the bottom right, you see Open Elements, which is my company. So my company is part of JakartaEE too, since I was a member of the expert group of Java Bean validation. Java Bean validation is one of the specifications that is part of JakartaEE. And here we have a list of all the specifications that are currently in JakartaEE. Actually, this is already JakartaEE 11, so the next version of JakartaEE that is just around the corner. And here you can see that there are way more specifications, modules, projects, however you want to call it, that are part of JakartaEE. And what you can see here are those three different profiles, right? And the small one on the right, which contains REST, JSON, annotations, interceptors, and the CDI modules, that is the JakartaEE core profile that is used as a base for MicroProfile 2. Everything else, which is in the web profile and then totally on the left in the full JakartaEE profile, is not part of MicroProfile, but the 7 specifications that are part of the JakartaEE 11 core profile are supported by MicroProfile 2. Okay, so that's an overview about JakartaEE, and now we are coming to the next project, which is Eclipse Adoptium. And since I'm part of the Adoptium working group and steering committee, that's why I'm saying since we created a short trailer for Adoptium, I would like to show it here. And the great thing with this trailer is, and that's again one of the great things of the Eclipse Foundation, right? That people from Red Hat, from Microsoft, and from OpenElement worked together on this vision of the trailer and created this trailer together. That is really great. Adoptium. So Adoptium is again one of the working groups and top level projects of the Eclipse Foundation. And while MicroProfile and JakartaEE is more about the enterprise section of Java, Adoptium is really about the core. And it's the newest of the projects we're talking about. And it came exactly at the right moment to the Eclipse Foundation, because it came up when people were really afraid about the future of Java. Maybe you can still remember some years ago in like 2018, 2019, when the new release train of Java was announced with like LTS support and non-LTS support, and Oracle only provided each version for non-paying customers for half a year. A lot of people were afraid about the future of Java. There were even some article about it. So sorry about that. I missed to change that screenshot. That is still from the EclipseCon, which was in Germany, and that is from the biggest tech blog in Germany, an article which just asked, will Java now cost money? Because those are all things people ask in 2018. And happily, Adoptium came around, which is the successor of Adopt OpenJDK and is a working group within the Eclipse Foundation. And Adopt OpenJDK was a community project with a goal to build Java runtimes, or to build a Java runtime, a vendor-neutral Java runtime. And that becomes so big and famous that we happily now at Eclipse Foundation. So I was already in the steering committee of Adopt OpenJDK and did, together with a lot of other people, the move to the Eclipse Foundation. And again, here in the bottom, you can see the members of the working group of Adoptium. Again, players that we now seen several times, like Microsoft, Red Hat, and IBM. But here we have some other players that are not that interested in enterprise edition of Java, but really interested in the core, like Canonical, the company behind Ubuntu, or Rivals that create like chips, or Azure who provide Java runtimes and support for Java runtimes too. And what Adoptium is doing is, next to several other projects that I will show you in a minute, is that Adoptium provides an OpenJDK distribution. And it's the only vendor-neutral OpenJDK distribution in the world. And that distribution is called Tamarin. And when I started to talk about Tamarin like 1 or 2 years ago, people ask all the time one question: why Tamarin? Right? So, short answer: adopt OpenJDK. We couldn't use that anymore because, like with JakartaEE, OpenJDK is trademarked by Oracle, so we needed a new name. And while we came up with Adoptium as a working group, we wanted to have a name for the product too. And we came up with Tamarin. So now you might ask yourself, okay, yeah, I got it that you need a name, but Tamarin, why is that name? So there are two very good reasons why that is the best, really the best name for Java runtime that you can choose. And I will show you those two reasons. So that's reason one. And the second reason is that in chemistry, Tamarin is the, well, I don't know the name, molecule, or however you call something like that, that is the nearest one to coffee. And so what could be a better name for a Java runtime as something that is an anagram for runtime and is as near to caffeine as possible? And not only because of the name, I assume more because of it's open source, it's vendor neutral, and it's secure and enterprise ready. Tamarin is really a great success. And I checked the number of downloads of Tamarin for the EclipseCon last year. So here you see like the download count on the 16th October of last year. And that was 244 million downloads. And with that, as far as I can say, Eclipse Tamarin is the most used Java runtime in the world. I haven't seen any download number that is as near to that one. And yeah, that is already some months ago, right? So here's an update. This morning, I checked the downloads, and we already have over 300 million of downloads of Eclipse Tamarin, which is really a huge success. And the great thing is that I'm not here to tell you use only Eclipse Tamarin and nothing else, because we at the Eclipse Foundation want to be as open as possible. What we did is we created, as one of the projects of Adoptium, a marketplace that lists all Java runtimes that are based on some specific criteria from different vendors, so that you have the freedom of choose which Java distribution, which OpenJDK build you want to use, right? So if you want to have something as open as possible, or totally vendor neutral, use Tamarin. But maybe you already have, I don't know, a support package at Red Hat or something like that. Then you can come to our marketplace and download the enterprise-ready version of Red Hat, of the Red Hat builds of the OpenJDK. Because all downloads here in our marketplace are TCK certificated, which means that they passed the test compatibility kit check of the OpenJDK and are verified by Aquavit. I will talk about Aquavit in a second, because Aquavit is another project I'm really proud of, that Adoptium creates so cool stuff. And that is a project that is used to test Java runtimes and to check the quality of Java runtimes. And you can think about it like that, right? You have a Java runtime, so you build your Java runtime, and then you can use Aquavit to totally test your Java runtime and check if it's rock solid and enterprise ready. And we do this by executing a large number of tests. So those are not really updated. I assume it's already more than that. But here you can see that when looking at those test box, that we have different types of tests. So we have all the tests that are part of the OpenJDK, which is around 9,000, that are executed automatically with every Aquavit execution. Then on top of that, Aquavit provides around 20,000 functional tests and around 25,000 system tests. So additional tests next to the tests that are coming out of the OpenJDK. Before talking about the external tests, let's talk about the perf tests, because what Aquavit is doing too, it does benchmarking. So it does not only test like a unit test if something is working or not, it even executes a huge amount of benchmarks and checks if the performance of the JDK is not went down. So if the JDK is still at least as performant as the last version. And next to this, we have this external section where we do over 100,000 additional tests that are coming from other projects, like, for example, all the open source TCKs. Actually, we have written down here the MicroProfile TCKs. The idea is to have the JakartaEE TCKs, since they are now open source too, added to this one. I don't know what the state here is. Maybe I need to update the slide, right? But what happened here is, so your JDK that you have built, so your Java runtime, will be used to execute those TCKs and to check if those TCKs are all green with your runtime. And since all those TCKs and all other test cases, that include the test cases from Tomcat and from JavaDB and so on, are all really enterprise-related test cases, Aquavit is really great to check if your Java runtime is enterprise-ready and solid. And next to this, all that is transparent and open source, right? So with the TCK from the OpenJDK, we have the same problem as we had with the TCKs for JakartaEE. That is closed by Oracle, so no one really knows what tests are part of the TCK. But everything that is in Aquavit is 100% open source, and everyone can check the quality and do a security audit of that. That is really great. And by doing so with Adoptium, we really created a fully transparent and open supply chain for a Java binaries for the Java distribution, excluding the TCK checks that from the OpenJDK TCK that sadly need to be done behind closed doors. And one step that is maybe not, others do it too, as in JakartaEE, the big players in Adoptium. We're happy that since the end of last year, we now even provide commercial support for the Eclipse Tamarind binaries and other projects out of the Adoptium ecosystem. And since I talked a lot about security, especially in the Adoptium sector, I want to go a little bit deeper into that because I think for a Java runtime security is a super important topic. And at Adoptium, especially within the last months, we invested a lot in that topic, especially in the topic of software supply chain security. And our goal was and is to have Adoptium as a beacon project for transparent software supply chains and for secure software supply chains. To do today what other projects will do maybe in 1 or 2 years, or maybe do once it need to be done based on law or any other regulations. And we have a documentation for that. I just put the link here. That we always update based on what we do in that topic. One thing we're currently working on is, for example, the implementation of the supply chain levels for software artifacts framework, which is an open source specification on how a supply chain security should happen and what are like attack vectors for a supply chain. And what you can do there, or they have different levels, and the project can be in a specific level to see like how good the supply chain security of that project is. And all Adoptium projects are at least in level 2. Some of them are already in level 3, which is really a great state. To give you some examples what we are doing in that area. For example, for Adoptium, we provide SBOMs, so software bill of materials, for each and every release. And since all our releases, binaries, are hosted at GitHub, so when you download it from our API or from the Adoptium webpage, at the end, you really download it from GitHub because that is where our binaries are stored. Next to this, as you can see in the screenshot, I just did a screenshot from one of the GitHub releases, we add SBOMs to each and every release and host them in parallel to the binaries so that everyone can have a look at it. And if you never experience what an SBOM is, so what we have here is we support the cyclen.dx format for SBOMs and provide it in JSON. And that one contains a definition on how the project has been created and what parts are used to create the project and what parts are part of the project. Here you, for example, see what tools are used to create the project and so on. So this is just the start of the SBOM of the project. And another point where I'm really happy that this is working now are reproducible builds. So since Java 21, Tamarin builds are 100% reproducible. And the Tamarin working group and members on the Tamarin working groups invested a lot in this topic and even did a lot of commits and changes to the OpenJDK to make this happen. So what does it mean, reproducible builds? Let's think about that. Let's assume you have a build server and that one creates a binary of Tamarin. Let's say like for the version, what is it, 21.0.2. And you have a second build server that maybe 2 days later creates a binary out of that tag. And now you have 2 binaries of Tamarin that are built at a different time by different build servers. And if you do a diff between those 2 binaries, you won't see any change. So both binaries are for 100% exactly the same. And I'm just see that I mixed the slide. So normally that slide should come before that one. Anyway, so that's another great thing where I'm quite happy on regarding the software supply chain security at Adoptium. I can talk way longer about Adoptium, Tamarin, and all the things, but let's move forward. And since we did a deep dive into several different projects regarding the Java ecosystem in the Eclipse Foundation, what I would like to do now is to combine those pieces. Because when thinking about what we've seen so far with the Eclipse platform project, we have an open and free IDE. And with Eclipse Tamarind, we have an open and free Java distribution. And then with Eclipse JakartaEE and or MicroProfile, we have specifications and standards to create enterprise applications. Which means within the Eclipse Foundation, we have a vendor-neutral, open and modern, full and rich tool set to develop Java-based applications. And since it's vendor neutral and open and solid and standardized, it's a perfect thing to be used within enterprise and within education. In education, you don't need to pay for anything, right? You can use it as it is, and it's well documented. So you do not need to have a small community with only a few people knowing about it. No, it's documented. The APIs are stable. You can do in a course where people learn Java and use JakartaEE, you will find so much good tutorials, documentation, to-dos, and so on, as for nothing else. And the students only need to understand the APIs, because the implementation of all those APIs is hidden, right? You work with a specification, with a standard. By doing so, the students can really create clean projects without, by accident, using any implementation details or doing any hacks, because that is not possible with Eclipse Java. And even if you would say like, yeah, but in the industry, when the people go to a startup or something like that, in our days, they will use something like Quarkus or Spring or Micronaut. Fine. All that is based on Eclipse Java. All that is using parts from JakartaEE or MicroProfile. I mean, when you use database entities in Spring, you use JPA, which is a part of JakartaEE, and so on, and so on. Micronaut, I think Micronaut uses CDI, the CDI spec. Quarkus is totally based on all those specs. So having Eclipse Java in education is the best you can do to get ready for working as a professional in the Java ecosystem. With Tamarind, you can simply distribute it on all machines within a university because it's free. It has free LTSs. It has an API that you can use to automatically download versions and update them. And on the other hand, we have the enterprise. And the benefit of the enterprise is that for Eclipse Java, there are thousands of developers on the market. Even if you do not use JakartaEE or the Eclipse IDE today, you know about it, right? And it's not something totally new. Sometimes it's just like going back to the roots, or in case of maybe MicroProfile, it's 50% that you know since studies and only some new parts. And even those new parts are standardized and are specs. So it's not that you need to understand and learn any deep implementation and work with uncommented code. Everything is well documented, well communicated, and easy to learn. And as you've seen, Eclipse invests a lot in project security. So everything that happens under the project that we've seen within the Eclipse Foundation and other projects in the Eclipse Foundation too, so it's not only about the Java projects, has a big focus on security to provide projects that are really working solid and enterprise ready. And for those projects, there is even commercial support. There is commercial support for JakartaEE. There is commercial support for Tamarind. So even for enterprise, you can get what you need. And that makes Eclipse Java just great. Again, I asked Mike if he can say something about it. And what Mike said about that and the future of Java is that he said, I think the future of Java is solid. there's a steady drumbeat of new language features coming in Java, which are keeping the language and platform current and relevant for developers, particularly for cloud-native workloads and applications. And it's exactly that, right? So Java, the future of Java is great, and Eclipse is really well settled to be one of the big cornerstones for that. And next to this, as we've seen, all of that, the IDE, MicroProfile, JakartaEE, Adoptium, we do not talk about products here, right? It's Eclipse project is a toolset, for example. MicroProfile and JakartaEE are specifications. And Adoptium, next to Tamarin, which is a product, okay, provides a lot of additional tooling, like, for example, we've seen with Aquavit. So the scope of all that is even bigger and better than a regular Java enterprise developer needs, which is great. So it's not only like providing products that can be used by the ecosystem, it's already even like extending the ecosystem and providing tooling to make the ecosystem more solid, better, and help it to grow. And now let's come back to the beginning. So, and talk about IntelliJ, Microsoft, and Spring Boot, right? And I already taught some of the things we've seen here. While IntelliJ has like no common code with Eclipse or something like that, I would say that IntelliJ as a product learned a lot from Eclipse and is heavily influenced by Eclipse, and definitely wouldn't be at the same point where it is today without that positive influence. And it's always good to have competitors in the market, like we have with IntelliJ, Visual Studio, and the Eclipse IDE. And Microsoft and the OpenJDK builds of Microsoft, which are great if you are running Java in the Azure cloud. A lot of the things Microsoft are doing here and a lot of the knowledge that allow Microsoft to build and maintain OpenJDK builds comes from their work in Adopt OpenJDK and Adoptium, because Adoptium is a successor of Adopt OpenJDK. So without Adopt OpenJDK and the Adoptium working group, I assume there wouldn't be any OpenJDK builds by Microsoft. And Spring Boot, as we've already seen, Spring Boot internally uses a lot of JakartaEE specifications and things like that. So I asked at the beginning how this talk can be about Eclipse if I use those things. I hope that now you know the answer of that. And so because Eclipse helps us to create awesome tools, educate private developers, and establish open communities, I think that's the answer to exactly that. And I would like to use the last 2 minutes to show you some additional numbers about the Eclipse Foundation and how the Eclipse Foundation is using Java next to what we've seen so far. So today, the Eclipse Foundation hosts 15 working groups in total. And I did some research and I found out that 12 of these 15 working groups contain Java-based projects. So mostly every working group within the Eclipse Foundation uses Java. And within those 15 working groups and all those top-level projects, there are about 400 projects as total within the Eclipse Foundation. And from those 400 projects, over 300 projects contain Java code. So a lot of the code of the projects within the Eclipse Foundation is done by Java or is based on Java. And I assume that's why, again, a quote from Mike. Mike says, Java is going to remain a big part of our community for the foreseeable future. And a nice quote about Adoptium, seeing 60 million downloads per month of our Tamarin OpenJDK distribution is pretty exciting. And I would underline exactly that. So as a conclusion, Java is really everywhere within the Eclipse Foundation, not only in the project we've did a deeper dive into today, and based on that, from my point of view, Java is really a big cornerstone in the Java ecosystem. And with all the things that are coming up, it's even growing and becoming more important for the Java ecosystem and for our full industry in enterprise and education. And if you are part of that, if you are a Java developer using all the tools and ask yourself, "Way, that is great. How can I help to have those projects even become bigger?" Because a lot of you might not be able to, work full-time at Eclipse projects, do all this open source work and so on. The Eclipse Foundation is a steward for the projects, and within the Eclipse Foundation, we have people who do stewardship on all that. And actually, at the moment, the voting for the Eclipse Board of Directors are again open, and I'm again one of the candidates you can vote on. And as you might see in this presentation, my heart is with Java, and my goal is to move all those Java-related projects within the Eclipse Foundation forward. So if you are interested in Java, I would be really happy if you vote for me for the Eclipse board election. Okay, that's really everything I have prepared for today, but I hope it's not everything at all, and a lot of cool stuff regarding Java will come in the Eclipse Foundation in future.
Thank you so much
you.
for the excellent presentation, Hendrik. We really enjoyed this presentation, and apologize ahead of time as well for the little technical discrepancy that we had at the beginning. But this session is 100% recorded. We're going to be sharing it on our YouTube channels and socializing it. So don't feel like you've actually missed out. You'll be able to watch it at your own convenience at a later date. So we invite anybody that has any questions to put them in the chat or the Ask a Questions tab as I wrap things up here. So we are looking to book some more Jakarta Tech Talks. So feel free to fill out the form that I'm going to be linking in the chat. And finally, your feedback is always greatly appreciated. So once this webinar session is done, feel free to provide your comments in the Crowdcast opportunity to share your experience. So it doesn't look like there's any questions, Hendrik. Thank you so much for today and for your patience. And we will all see you very, very shortly.